Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you could join me today. Make sure that you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with your family and friends. I have a great guest for today. I have Adam Kissel. He is the author of a brand new book, Slacking, a Guide to Ivy League Miseducation. Everyone needs to check it out, and I'll have links up at the P.A.S. Report website. Adam, welcome to the program. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm glad you come on because there's been a lot of talk about higher education. I've been a critic, even though I'm part of the system. I've been a critic for quite a long time because I believe that the higher education system has failed. And so can you explain to the audience what was the inspiration behind writing the book in the first place and why the Ivy Leagues have become such a problem?
Great question. I've been paying attention to higher ed and higher ed reform my whole career. But after the attacks of October 7th and the encampments, especially on the Ivy League campuses, I said, there's some large problems here that have not yet been solved. So let's look at admissions. Let's look at curriculum. Let's look at the culture on campus. And I'm not, of course, the first person to look at these, but curriculum has not been examined for quite a long time. So I thought that it had been a few decades since the National Association of Scholars had done a series of reports saying, do they still require at the top colleges Shakespeare, Western Civ, U.S. history? And the answer was mostly no. But today the question is, can you even find one good course on Shakespeare or Western Civ or U.S. history across the Ivy League? And I started my study, and the answer was yes, maybe one at a time, right? Per institution, you can find some, but most of the courses are in terrible shape in the humanities and social sciences. So that's how it got started.
Why do you think that is? Because I see the same thing. It is a big problem, especially in my field, political science. I have students that come in that know absolutely nothing about how the government operates, our founding documents. They were never assigned to read it in a K through 12 system. But I've also seen writing, reading, all go out the window. How did we get to this point?
Well, you make a good point about preparation for college in the K-12 system. Civics took a back seat over the last few decades to math and science, right? So the Sputnik moment changed the course of how K-12 saw its priorities, and civics just stopped being a priority. But at the college level, there's a book by Roger Kimball called Tenured Radicals, which has been around since the 90s. And he says, the 1960s and 1970s protesters became the tenured professors of today. And that was a generation ago. So those professors and their following graduate students are now the professors reproducing themselves as far leftist value types of people who no longer believe in core Western values, American values, the family, and they've constructed a curriculum to match. So how did they get in the academy? Well, they said to the conservatives who were better represented, please let us into the canon. We need to have our different points of view in there. So the conservatives said naively, sure, come in. Well, once they had the foot in the door, their idea was, we're going to take over the departments. They did. They took over the curriculum. And now conservatives are knocking on the door saying, can we please come in? And the answer isn't yes. So there's been an ideological capture of the departments, and it's the result of that has taken its place in the curriculum. And the more elite the institution, the more that has happened. So if you're close to the people, if you're a regional state university, you have different kind of accountability. But if you've been around since 1636 and you're Harvard and you think you can do whatever you want because you have a 5% admission rate in the college, then you do whatever you want, and you create a country club atmosphere with core curriculum courses that are biased, tendentious, narrow, self-indulgent, so that you can capture lots of tuition, tell students what they want to hear, reproduce their own prep school values, And you don't have to teach the best that has been taught and
The
said in the world.
academic ecosystem is really amazing. And I like how you pointed out that the 60s, 70s radicals are now the professors of today. And so it shows a lot of why we're in this moment. Now, when we talk about these institutions, the Ivy League institutions, supposed to be producing the best and brightest, the students of today are the leaders of tomorrow. How concerned are you that they go to these college campuses, they get radicalized, and ultimately they will become the industry leaders, whether it's business, whether it's education, whether it's public policy, law? How concerned are you?
I'm pretty concerned. So in the sciences, things are still pretty good. So if you become an engineer, you go to Cornell, you're in the School of Engineering, you're going to turn out well. And you take mostly engineering courses because it's a hard discipline and you don't have time for the frivolous courses. But if you're in the humanities or social sciences and you think you're going to be in government leadership, institutional leadership in a company, those are the people I'm really concerned about. So Yale, for instance, in their arts and humanities requirement says you're going to be able to understand and appreciate the highest achievements of humanity. But then you get to Yale, and the actual courses that are offered for you are drink culture, where you learn about cocktails, but not just about cocktails, but about colonialism and patriarchy in the formation of the cocktail industry, right? So instead of even getting something frivolous, you're getting something frivolous and biased. Or Beyonce Makes History is another class you can take at Yale to meet that same arts and humanities requirement. So you could have taken Shakespeare, you could have taken Beowulf. Instead, you get Beyonce or you get Bad Bunny, right? So you get the opposite of what has been the best and that has been thought and said in the world, as Matthew Arnold once said. You you do what Emerson said, which is you hitch your wagon to a star and you follow your passions. And then the college says, oh, I guess your passion is to learn about basket weaving. We'll give you some of that, and that'll count for your arts requirement, right? At Princeton, you could take a course just on shoes to meet your social sciences requirement. At Cornell, there is one bad science course at Cornell. You watch Disney movies about animals, and that's how you learn the biology of animals, because you compare Disney animals to real animals. So I am very concerned, to answer your question, about students today who think that they're becoming well-rounded, but they're only indulging their own and their
It's
professors'
completely
biases.
ridiculous. Now, we need to take a quick break, but when we get back, I want to touch on how parents and how students are paying for these courses that at colleges that cost $80,000, $90,000 per year. It's completely ridiculous. So everyone hang tight. We'll be right back. Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain and stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Well, discover Native Path Collagen, made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers. These are the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut. They provide maximum benefits, and Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything: coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. It doesn't clump, it absorbs fast thanks to its peptide formula. And the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee, Native Path is a brand you could trust. They offer an 800 number for any questions you may have, and then you'll speak to a real person who's there to help. Visit getnativepath.com/PAS and start your transformation today. That's getnativepath.com/PAS. Welcome back to the PAS Report podcast. I'm with Adam Kissel. He's talking about higher education, a lot of the rot that we're seeing. We see the fiscal rot because students are wasting money on frivolous courses. We also see the cultural rot. So first, let's tackle the fiscal rot. Why has it become acceptable for these institutions to offer ridiculous courses that don't do anything? They're not helping with intellectual growth, thinking critically, problem solving, and students are paying thousands upon thousands of dollars each semester. And we also have a student debt bomb that's about to go off. How is this possible?
At the Ivy League level, it's the name on the diploma that matters. So Harvard, Yale, Cornell, Brown, Penn, these are names that people recognize and remember. So if your diploma has that word on it, it doesn't matter what your GPA was. That GPA doesn't matter anymore anyway, because of grade inflation. Everybody has all A's and A minuses. So what matters is the name on the piece of parchment that is something that people recognize. So universities don't have to have any content that exists behind it. They have hundreds of years of noteworthiness that they can squander. And so they have squandered it, but the public doesn't really know very well yet, which is why we wrote the book, among other reasons, so that people can see that it's not the name on the diploma that you paid $80,000 or $90,000 a year for, with the extra networking that comes with that, which is valuable. But if you actually want to know if somebody became a better person, you want to find the value add, right? So the hardest thing about Harvard, the joke goes, is getting in. Once you get in, you can get your gentleman's A-, not doing any work, and you get that diploma with the name on it. Now, these are legacy elite institutions, but the legacy nature has not really caught up to them yet because people still like that word. So if I'm an employer and I get somebody and they say, I'm from Penn, and I'm the employer, I say, I recognize Penn. All right, were you a slacker? I want to see what courses you took. Did you take the easy courses, or did you take the striver courses that actually show you're a serious person? You don't just sit in your seat and write an essay. I pretend to learn and the teacher pretends to teach. I actually cared. I took a hard course and I learned something. I became a better human being. I became a better citizen. If my applicant can say something like that based on the courses that he took, that's the person I want. And if that person turns out to be from Clemson or Florida State University and not Penn,
it's a good point
I'd
you
rather
bring
have
up.
them.
Now, how much institutional damage have the administrators and the faculty caused? And just to bring Columbia into this, because Columbia is completely out of control, you now have a lot of business leaders saying, you know what, we're not even really going to look at Columbia University applicants anymore because we don't like the culture that's been cultivated on these campuses. Do you think that a lot of people, particularly in business and law and other institutions, are waking up to what these Ivy League institutions have done?
I think the last 2 years have been an eye-opening experience for a lot of professionals, people outside of higher education, to know better what's really happening on the inside. So you might remember that a number of judges said that law schools had become so corrupted that they were not going to have as law clerks during their judgeships people from some of the Ivy League law schools, because the culture at those law schools was no longer producing the kind of people who they could trust. Well, now we see businesses more often, I think, saying the same thing, that if you went to Columbia, maybe you ended up becoming a worse person instead of a better person because of the culture of political correctness on campus, the culture of intolerance, the anti-Semitism on campus, the encampments. And so if you're trying to become a better human being and citizen, you're not going to Columbia for it anymore. And if you're trying to find somebody who became a better human being and citizen and worker for you, you're not going to look at Columbia anymore like you used to, because it's not producing those kinds of people. Again, if you're looking for a good scientist who said, you know what, I don't care what's going on campus, on the quad, I'm going to sit in my room, sit in the library, learn my math, learn my statistics, it's hard to do worse than some of those great Ivy League institutions. That's where the greatness still is. But if I were a scientist at Columbia, I would say, why am I wasting my time here in this terrible campus? Why can't I just go to Vanderbilt, do my same research, get the same government research money for my medical or other research? And I won't have these civil rights problems, and my money won't be frozen because of the folks over in humanities who are making life
I think
hard
that's
for
an
me on the
important point that
campus.
you're bringing up, because there are a lot of good professors out there. There are professors that don't bring ideology into the classroom. They want to challenge their students. They want to push their students. At the same time, they've been the victims of the continual dropping of standards. And so, as you said before, we see this great inflation going on. But do you think that the Trump administration is taking the right approach? That if you're an Ivy League institution or any college or university, and you're pushing ideology over academics, then you don't deserve funding. Do you think that's the right approach?
I think it is. Now, the federal government, so my colleagues and I at Heritage say that the education department shouldn't exist. It should be dismantled. But while it does, it should at least enforce things like civil rights laws. So within that world of illegal DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, if those policies and practices are going so far that they're not just activist and distasteful, but they're actually discriminating against people on campus, and we have plenty of evidence of that, most recently at Cornell, Then the government, including the education department, has a very important, not just prerogative, but duty to step in and protect its students, enforce the law. So then the hard question is, if discrimination is pervasive across the whole campus and even in the classroom, well, should the government come in and say, well, if you have a discriminatory classroom, we can step into that? Or do we step in carefully because that's the traditional area of academic freedom for faculty? But if the discrimination is so pervasive, it goes into there, can the government step in? And so that's part of what today's hearing between Harvard and the government, I think, partly covered was, aren't there First Amendment issues in the way that we are enforcing civil rights laws? And how does civil rights protection and free speech in the classroom and on campus fit with that? And those questions have not really been answered in society. So we'll have to see what the judges in these cases say and what kind of compromises the government and places like Harvard come to. Penn has already capitulated on Title IX. That was the right thing to do. So you know what? There's a reality of men and women. Penn had to capitulate on that. Columbia has mostly capitulated. Harvard is still fighting.
And I think it's pretty clear. I mean, if there's something to be said about free speech, I am a big proponent of free speech. I celebrate freedom of speech, and I celebrate academic freedom too, because let's face it, as a professor, you have to bring up controversial topics, and there may be some people offended because they're so thin-skinned in this day and age. But at the same point, isn't it true that once classes are being disrupted by agitators, once you have students commandeering the college campus and campus buildings, once they're storming classrooms and screaming, queers for Palestine or whatever they want to scream, is it free speech at that point? Or now does the university have an obligation to put an end to these tactics?
You're correct. So the university has an obligation to put an end to substantial disruptions of the classroom, of the campus, of other activities that are the normal activities of the college. Protesting is something that can happen in the green spaces of campus if time, place, and manner restrictions that are narrowly tailored to preserving order on campus are followed. So if you're disrupting the classroom, if you're taking over the administration building, those are no longer free exercises. Similarly, even the American Association of University Professors, as far left as it has gone, still at least gives lip service to the responsibility of professors to not persistently introduce into the classroom activism that's unrelated to the topic of the course. Students pay a bunch of money to be in their chemistry course, and if you're telling them things that are other than chemistry, like about your personal life or about the president of the United States or about a foreign country that has nothing to do with chemistry, you can be punished for that, and you should, and the university has a reason to come after you.
We need to take a quick break, but when we get back, I want to talk about something that's prevalent on college campuses throughout the country, so everyone hang tight. We'll be right back. Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain and stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Well, discover Native Path Collagen, made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers. These are the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut. They provide maximum benefits, and Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything: coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. It doesn't clump, it absorbs fast thanks to its peptide formula. And the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee, Native Path is a brand you could trust. They offer an 800 number for any questions you may have, and then you'll speak to a real person who's there to help. Visit getnativepath.com/PAS and start your transformation today. That's getnativepath.com/PAS. Welcome back to the P.A.S. Report podcast. Glad you could join me. I have Adam Kissel here, and he has a great book out that you could go on. We'll have it at the P.A.S. Report website, PASreport.com. Author of Slacking, A Guide to Ivy League Miseducation. Now, Adam, one of the big concerns that I have, that I've seen prevalent, that's happening on college campuses, and now it's actually infected state education curriculums, is this idea of global citizenship. Earlier, you talked about, anti-Western culture, anti-Western civilization culture, and it seems like there's an effort to do away with Western civilization that has benefited us immensely here in America and throughout the entirety of the world. What are your thoughts on this idea of global citizenship? And do American universities actually have an obligation to the country that they rely on the tax dollars and the student dollars that are coming in?
My view is that they do. The United States is subsidizing
And I
higher
just want to make it
education
clear, even though
for
places like
America.
Harvard and Yale, even though those are private universities, they still receive a ton of taxpayer money through the form of grants and other activities. So it's important that the audience knows that you may hear about private universities, but they're still receiving a lot of tax dollars.
We're talking about $1 billion at Cornell, $2 billion at Harvard. This is real money, and hundreds of billions of dollars across the country, private and public universities, being subsidized by the federal government, also by state governments. Harvard even gets out of income tax because it's a nonprofit, right? And it doesn't pay property tax in Cambridge because it is a nonprofit educational institution. All these different benefits, but they think of themselves as universities of the world, that they don't have. So one of my mentors who happens to be at Harvard right now, Danielle Allen, said, we're not even saying thank you. At least we should say thank you to Americans for providing so much money that let us do what we do. First step is admitting that you have a problem and that you understand where you are in society. They are in the United States. They are American universities. They teach people from around the world. People use the inventions around the world. But at the end of the day, they're American universities. One of the interesting places this matters is in the Higher Education Act Title VI programs, which are designed to educate Americans in the cultures and languages of other countries in order to promote American values. So you learn about the Middle East so that you can go in as a diplomat into the Middle East or maybe a spy, and you serve American values because you understand Middle Eastern cultures and languages. Well, what happens in Middle East studies programs, but they attract people who like the Middle East better than they like America, and they spend Americans' money to undermine America. And we see that all over the country, but especially, again, at the Ivy League institutions that say, you know what, the values that people learn back home in Iowa are just the wrong values. We need to be more like Europe and have this internationalist perspective. My boss's boss's boss at Heritage, Kevin Roberts, is great on Americanism versus kind of this world order and the kind of values that get undermined. But America has, we're going to do a little bit of civics here, right? The best constitution in the world. We've been a democracy and a republic for 250 years. We're celebrating that birthday of independence next year, 250 years. And capitalism that goes along with it, the market economy, has brought 2 billion people out of abject poverty around the world, whereas communism, which is often the world alternative, killed 100 million people in the 20th century. So it's really no contest. And if you're Harvard, you should say, hey, there's something about Western
You would
civ
think,
we should
and
pass on.
I just want to point out to the audience that there are real world consequences to what's going on our university campuses. I mean, I clearly remember under the Biden administration when the October 7th terror attacks, Hamas killed thousands of Jews that were simply minding their own business, going to a party, you know, some in their homes, little kids, babies. And then the Biden administration, they didn't put together a coherent policy. Nobody really knew what they stood for. But we saw the State Department officials, employees of the State Department, actually come out and write a letter condemning the Secretary of State and the President of the United States by extension, who is the one that makes foreign policy here in the United States. So when you say that these students will go through, let's say, a Middle Eastern study program, and they're actually being instilled with Middle Eastern values rather than learn about the culture, but still instill American values, they go on into important positions and they undermine the United States, do they not?
It's a very scary and disappointing position to be in. So part of the problem is who we educate as Americans going out. And then part of the problem is all of the foreign students who come in. So if you're going to be an undergraduate or graduate student from China, you basically have to agree to become a spy for China while you're in the United States. And if you don't, China knows where your family and friends are, and they may be in trouble if you're not enough of a spy for the government of China. So at Columbia University, half of the graduate students are from China. I mean, half of the international students are from China, and that's a humongous proportion, tens of thousands of graduate students. So on the one hand, we're educating people to hate America who are Americans. On the other hand, we're educating people who love China in America and sending them back with intel
Yeah, no
on
country
us.
in the world would do something this stupid, and yet here we are. And we have to look at, because something you covered is the accreditation process and the accrediting agencies, where the accreditors reward almost ideological conformity over academic rigor. So we now see this new accreditor system being formed by 6 states. How could this disrupt the cartel-like control of the legacy accreditors out there?
So the legacy accreditors were like the gangs of New York, like each one had its own turf as a region, and they wouldn't encroach on each other's turf. What Trump 1 did is said, no, everybody gets to be on everybody's turf. So that introduced some competition, but not really a lot of opportunity for innovation because we needed new accreditors to come in with different values and ideas. So what 6 states have done, mainly in the Southeast, but also Texas, is said, well, we want to accredit universities that have good outcomes for their students. We don't care as much about inputs, how many books are in your library, how many square feet per student are in the classrooms. We want to know, are your students getting good jobs? Is there a good return on investment? And are your students even graduating? What's your graduation rate? Things like that. So now universities are incentivized to innovate because their federal dollars depend on being accredited, but they can choose the new accreditor that will give a stamp of approval for anybody who has actually good outcomes for their students without the DEI politicization that comes back to the cartel behavior of the legacy accreditors, which often abuse their power and said, if you don't do DEI, we might
And
not
I have to
accredit you.
ask, as someone that was appointed by Governor DeSantis, aligning with this idea of civics reform, what do you see as the most promising state level strategy to fix the higher education system itself, but also to restore civic literacy in the next generation of Americans?
Two different questions. Each has a different answer. And the first is that reforming public universities, which is where most of the students still go in most of the states, means the legislature and the governor and the education folks at the regulatory level, at the state level, say, if you guys are not going to offer a good education, we're going to make you do it. And if you guys are going to have a DEI set of programs, we're going to make you not do it. So if you could trust faculty members to do it on their own, you would have seen them reform. But since they're not, the most important thing that states are doing is saying, we're going to step in and fix the problems that you are not fixing. And then if you deserve your deference again, we'll give it back to you, but not until then. In the civics area, what a bunch of states have done is create civics-oriented and leadership-oriented centers, some of which even control core curriculum courses, to say, especially since the K through 12 system has failed in the civics area, we're going to make sure that every student has an opportunity and maybe even a requirement to get high quality civics and leadership education, a classical education, a great books oriented education, get some leadership in there so that you can be the kind of human being and citizen we want you to be. So these extra centers that specialize in civics are a huge way to
And I think that's really important.
accomplish
A
that
lot of
end.
people will argue, and I'm talking about from the left, they're going to argue that conservatives want to keep students dumb, that they don't want to teach students how to read and write, partly why they want to see the Department of Education closed down. I always argue students already can't read and write, so the ship sailed on that a long time ago. But when we're looking at it, there is still value in a classical education, is there not? And that's what we want to promote.
Yeah, so it's not just what are you against? So, okay, you can be against DEI. What are you for? But you're for the great books because they teach you how to become a better person. They're part of the great conversation, helping you make the tradition your own, to think it through critically and say, you know what? I actually like those American values. They're actually good for people. We like having freedom of speech, freedom of religion, equality under the law, not having the King of England in charge of us, not having Parliament tax us without representation. We actually like those things. So if you think them through, make them your own, that's what a great education does for you. And sometimes you say, well, I guess we do have some things to change. Maybe slavery was a bad idea and we need to change that. And then you do go through a thoughtful period of change.
100% correct. Can't argue with that. And everyone needs to check out the book Slacking, A Guide to Ivy League Miseducation. Adam, I really appreciate the conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.